Well, my name is David Lange, and I, among other things, am a collector of antique coin albums, coin boards. I've made a study of this for 35 years now, and I've also published a book on that. And I'm here today to talk about why one would want to collect coin boards. Basically, the coin board was introduced in 1935 at a time when coin collecting was a very elitist hobby. People had to be quite wealthy. Coin albums cost several dollars each, which was prohibitive for the general public. In 1935, there appeared a simple 25-cent item for collecting coins from circulation. It was called the coin board. They basically measure 11 by 14 so that they can be put in a standard frame, and they were an immediate success. The inventor of the coin board was Joseph Kent Post. He was an engineer for Kimberly-Clark Corporation in Enota, Wisconsin. And during the Great Depression, Kimberly-Clark sales went down, so they cut his hours and thus his salary. So, looking about for a way to supplement his income and support his family, he turned to his hobby of coin collecting. And he realized that what was missing was a way for the everyman to collect coins, some way to get into it inexpensively. So he used his knowledge of paper products and engineering, did a little bit of tinkering, and came up with the very first coin board. His original prototype is somewhat oversized. It's not this standard format that we now know today, and those are a very rare item. There are only 3 of those known, one in my collection, one in his granddaughter's collection, and one in the hands of one of my coin board customers. I've been doing this long enough now that I have a little sideline business buying and selling coin boards. The first production models that were mass produced in 1935 were somewhat similar to this piece we see here for Liberty Head nickels. They are very attractively designed, includes a nice illustration, including the extremely rare 12-star Liberty Head nickel. These were sold at 25 cents, and they were not an item that was actually produced for sale by coin dealers. It was not an established market product. These were to be found at newsstands, 5 and dime stores, tobacco shops, any place where people were going about their normal business and might discover the hobby of coin collecting. For simple 25 cents, you could take this home, look through your pocket change, maybe get some rolls of coins from the bank. And it was almost a game of sorts. It was a way to pass time. It was something the family could sit around the kitchen table and look through a stack of nickels or pennies, dimes, all different sorts of popular coins that were in circulation at that time. And it's a very plain and homely product. It has just very basic numismatic information, some of which is quite erroneous by modern standards. Joseph Post advised collectors to clean their coins with vinegar and a pencil eraser before putting them in the board, and I can say from experience that quite a few people took him up on that suggestion. This particular variety here is the first edition of the Liberty Head nickel board. It's not an extremely rare board, but it's very, very rare in this condition. This is the finest example known, and these have sold for close to $200 in the coin board market. It's a small but growing hobby. We have a hardcore fan following, and I do what I can to get the word out. I put out a quarterly newsletter called Coin Board News, and it tells about developments in the coin board hobby. Of course, I sell my book as well, and that gets the word out. But Mr. Post was somewhat overwhelmed by the project, so he chose to go to Whitman Publishing in nearby Racine, Wisconsin, to do the actual manufacturing. At that time, Whitman was a manufacturer of jigsaw puzzles, children's books, all sorts of novelty pieces, and they had the tooling to do this in a production basis. Well, what Whitman discovered is that their own personnel were taking some of these boards home and playing with them, trying to fill them themselves. And so, before the end of 1935, Whitman Publishing actually bought the rights from Joseph Kent Post for the coin boards and began manufacturing them under their own brand. The Whitman boards, by and large, are fairly common. They're kind of the core of the hobby. They're entry-level pieces. However, there are several titles in the Whitman line that are extremely rare because they were not good sellers. You can imagine in the 1930s, there were very few people who could afford to collect silver dollars. So this board, which came out in 1939, had only a single printing and is an extreme rarity today. I've seen perhaps 7 or 8 examples of this board, and pretty much every customer on my mailing list has this on their want list. And I haven't seen one come into the market for about 6 years now. It's very well crafted. It's very heavy cardstock. Unlike the post boards, the paper is very thick. Comes with basic information about the coin series, the same thing you would see on Whitman folders today, also a listing of available titles. And it's interesting to note too that in the early days Whitman published and printed in both Racine and Poughkeepsie, New York. That lasted until about 1941 when World War II changed the dynamics of the printing business and created paper shortages. So while most Whitman boards are fairly common, this particular one is an extreme rarity, and this is the finest example known. It's from my own collection. One of the early imitators of the Whitman product was Colonial Coin and Stamp Company, which is a coin dealership in New York City. In its day, the mid to late 1930s, it was one of the largest coin dealerships in New York, far bigger than its contemporary Stax at that time, more like on a par with Raymond. And they took this concept one step further by actually making a clear backing for this coin board. As a result, these retailed for 25 cents, or for 35 cents rather, instead of the standard 25 cents. These are kind of the Cadillac of coin boards. They also have very, very attractive graphics. Here you see a young teenage boy examining his coin collection with a magnifying glass. You have a somewhat unrealistic image of the coin type. That's very typical of these boards. The artists often worked from memory rather from the actual coin. And it does have this wonderful clear cellophane backing, which allows you to see both sides of the coin. This is not a very rare board, but again, condition is everything, just as in coin collecting. Almost all of these boards have many of the openings punched through. They have bent corners. This one here is a near mint example, which is an extreme rarity for condition.
So David, on this particular board, I see on that 1913 Type 1 that the backing is a little bit crinkled. In actual use, not as a vintage antique where it'd be a little more fragile, I mean, were these easily damaged by collectors putting their coins in them?
Yeah, they are very subject to damage. You have to remember, in their own time, these were not collectibles in their own right. They were simply tools. A great many of these were purchased by or for children, and children are rather careless in their handling of things, so the typical coin board that one finds today has a dozen or more of these openings punched through. Very often you'll find writing on them. People will write the date they bought a coin or they paid for it. One of the most familiar things you see written on coin boards is on the back somebody will write, began collection June 2nd, 1938, or something to that effect. It's almost like it was a challenge. It's like, how long is it going to take me to finish this collection? So condition is everything with coin boards. There are rare titles that are worth a great deal of money in any condition, but for a relatively common board like this that was produced in large numbers, condition is everything. Now here we have a very, very interesting item. As you see that this board here is actually in a landscape format, and there's a reason for that. These were not sold as standalone items. They were actually part of a coin collecting kit called the Penny Hobby Coin Collecting Outfit. It was almost like a board game format. There are Indian penny boards and Lincoln penny boards that came with the set, along with the booklet about the coins and about listing all the prices that dealers pay for these coins. And when new, these boards by the Gramercy Stamp Company had all of the openings with removable plugs. Well, naturally, as people built these sets, the plugs got tossed out. This is an extremely rare example that actually has one surviving plug. You see it carries the date for it, and so they all at one point had these plugs. And it's almost impossible to find them with the plug still intact. These boards are printed on the back. They do have information about the coin type and also about Gramercy Stamp Company. In my research for my coin board book, I did go to all of the locations where these were published, and the building in New York City's Chelsea district is still there. Looks very much the same as it did in 1939-40 when these were made. It's just now far more upscale these days. That neighborhood was borderline slum back then. It was industrial. Now it's very choice residential real estate. These Gramercy boards are not super rarities. This Indian penny board, there's perhaps 12 to 15 known. But again, condition is very much a factor in these, and of course finding them with any of the plugs in place is a very rare circumstance. They also have quite attractive graphics, these somewhat childlike images of Indians and the Pilgrims and whatever cultural aspects they had to these at the time. Here we get into an ultra rarity by brand alone. This was produced by Earl and Kohler, which was a Portland, Oregon coin dealership and novelty shop. They learned of the coin board phenomenon in the late 30s, and they decided to get in on the game because having vending business on the side and owning a novelty shop, they went through tremendous numbers of coins, and they discovered that there were some rare coins that would bring a premium value. So after buying the boards of some other dealers for a number of years, they eventually went in 1939 to produce their own line, which proved to be extremely unsuccessful. They did just a single printing, and all of their boards are tremendous rarities. When you do find the Earl and Kohler brand, it's typically the Lincoln Cent board. There's perhaps 9 or 10 of those known with several different ink printing styles. And of the Buffalo nickel board, I know of only 2 examples, this one from my collection and another lesser one that I sold to one of my customers a few years ago. And then finally there's a mercury dime board, which has this amazing color scheme. It's almost like a lavender or shocking pink, very startling look, and that's also known to the extent of 2 pieces, mine and one that I sold to another collector. What makes them so collectible is that they are the story of coin collecting in our modern times. Coin collecting was a very elitist hobby until the 1930s. Most people didn't even know that there was such thing as a premium price on a coin. But this is what brought it to the general public. It became a family hobby, an everyman hobby. And these coin boards were the entry point. They were made until the early 1940s, at which point the few publishers still in the game transitioned to the folders that we still have today.
Why did the industry transition from coin boards to folders?
The reason they switched from the board format to the folder format is that the coin series that were ongoing simply went on too long. There was a limited number of Lincoln pennies that you could put on the board, and they kept compressing the holes closer and closer together. They would eliminate the graphics to make more room, and finally, in the very latest Whitman coin boards, they even eliminated the title. So the Lincoln Cent board from 1943 or 44 is just a series of openings with the printed dates. And at that point it was evident that they could not continue using this format. So they went to cutting these into individual panels that folded over. The first coin folder manufacturer was Dansko, then known as Daniel Stamp Company, and then Whitman picked up on that very shortly afterwards and did the similar format.
So modern coins killed the coin board?
The ongoing series, yes. It was very unusual to have a coin series going beyond its 25-year minimum lifespan, but series such as Mercury Dimes and Lincoln Cents killed off the coin board. And as a result, you cannot find a Mercury Dime board that actually accommodates all of the coins. The last ones were printed in 1943, and that's where the openings end. So periodically I'll get coin collectors who want to put in their set of Mercury Dimes in a coin board, and I have to explain to them, well, that's all well and good, but your set's going to end at 1943, and sometimes that kills the deal. But for a more compact series like Buffalo Nickels, you can get it complete. They made coin boards for all of the series that were then in circulation. Liberty Nickels, Buffalo Nickels, Barber, Silver, Dimes, Quarters, Halves, Indian Cents. Whitman, being the more adventurous publisher, even went into obsolete series. They put out coin boards for large cents, which are very rare, and even for Liberty Seated Dimes, a 2-part board, and that's another extreme rarity.
What about for the gold types?
No, the whole purpose behind coin boards was primarily for people to collect from circulation and then maybe buy worn examples of the pieces they were missing. There are absolutely no coin boards for gold coins by date. Wade Raymond produced albums for the more advanced collectors for gold dollars and gold commemoratives, but generally speaking, coin boards were an inexpensive item for the low-budget collector.
Well, at the same time that these were being produced was the height of the commemorative craze. Were they doing commemorative coin boards, or are there too many of those?
There are commemorative coin boards. All are extremely rare. Whitman produced two formats, the one standard 11 by 14 format and then a half-size one as well, which I know of only 3 examples of the latter and maybe 4 examples of the standard format. And interestingly enough, the commemorative half-dollar board has no backing because, of course, with a commemorative, you want to see both sides of the coin. They're unique. So the Whitman commemorative board has no backing whatsoever. Very, very rare item. I can't remember the last time I saw one. Like any great hobby, once it catches on, people hoard the rarities, and now it's nearly impossible for me to supply my customers with their want list items, whereas there are many coin boards that are very common and go begging because the hobby hasn't grown enough yet.
Right.
One last one I want to show you. Speaking of half dollars, this board was made primarily for the commemorative half-dollar hobby. It's a very simple and plain looking board from Joseph Oberweis & Company, a Los Angeles publisher which produced gazillions of coin boards. His brand is very common. However, so few people collected half dollars and silver dollars back then because of their high face value that this board is absolutely unique. This is the only example I've ever seen in 35 years of collecting. Very homely, plain board. You print in your own date and type for the coins, but it's an immense rarity. I wouldn't even know how to value this if I got a second example. We've had rare coin boards such as the Earl and Kohlers have been bringing in the $500 to $600 range in average condition. I imagine if I were able to get another example that I could sell, this would be perhaps the first coin board to break the $1,000 barrier. It's just unknown at this point because it's unique, and there's also an Oberweis silver dollar board which is unique in my collection too. They are illustrated in the book, but after 35 years I've never even seen or heard of another example of either one.
Well, that's the great thing about numismatics when you think about it, is it goes so far beyond the coin. You know, it's the coin, it's the hobby, it's the industry, it's the personalities, it's the companies that come and go. And these coin boards really just show how the market that we have today developed from a very humble beginning.
Indeed, we have an 80-year history of coin collecting as a popular hobby. Coin collecting from circulation pretty well peaked in the 1960s, and it's not a major component of the market today. But this is what got millions of people collecting coins. It was an unknown thing before that. As a person who works with coins every day and gets to see major rarities, I'm not that compelled to collect coins myself. It's too much of a busman's holiday. But I love the history of the hobby, particularly in the popular era, the 1930s to date. I've devoted the last 35 years of my collecting activity to acquiring every conceivable coin album, coin board, coin folder. I just have thousands and thousands of pieces by titles, editions, and varieties. And I'm gradually writing a series of books about each publisher. Little by little, I've done 2 coin album books and, of course, the coin board book. And I think it's a wonderful hobby. I see tremendous potential with this if you can get more people involved. If you finally break that $1,000 barrier, I think a lot of people will take a look at this. You may recall, Charles, that not too long ago we had a story about that Earl and Kohler board in CoinWeek breaking that $500 barrier. And I got tremendous number of contacts from people after that. Mostly people who had common boards hoping to cash in on a fortune. But I also got some very good contacts, and some nice boards came out of the woodwork. But I think it's a growing hobby. It's a hobby that has a lot of upward growth potential. There are common boards that anybody can buy. There are extreme rarities that are a source of frustration, like trying to find another one of these. But the greater part of the coin board hobby consists of pieces of which there are anywhere from a few dozen to a couple hundred known. So it's a hobby that can be pursued by people.